Think you can't afford to offer a 401k plan? Not so fast. Because today, we're diving into why that might not be the case at all. What I'm about to share with you could completely transform how you think about retirement options for yourself and your employees. Plus, stick around till the end for a bonus tip that could help you save thousands in taxes while providing your employees with a solid retirement plan. I'm Rich Smith, and I specialize in helping small business owners like you unlock financial strategies that drive growth and employee satisfaction. Today, we're joined by business expert and CEO of 401go, Dan Beck. Having started and been involved with over a dozen small businesses and startups, Dan knows that the size of the business doesn't matter. The people in your business matter. If you're grappling with the challenges of attracting and retaining amazing employees, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're going to break down the vital elements of an effective 401k plan, how it benefits your business, and the steps you can take to get started. A lot of business owners mistakenly believe that 401k plans are out of reach. But when you understand how to leverage them effectively, the benefits are undeniable. So let's dive into our discussion with Dan Beck. Take us back to when you were that small business owner first starting out and you were looking into a benefits program for some of your employees.
There were actually a few times that I had tried to set up a 401k. The first time, I'll be honest, it was really for my primary benefit. I think I only had like one or two employees at the time, and I talked to them about it, and they let me know that it wasn't something that they were very much interested in. And so it was really because I had an incredible year and I had a lot of taxes to pay, and was talking to my CPA, and we talked about SEPs and simples, and we can get more into that later. Sure. But all these different ways of saving money in a tax haven of sorts. And I decided a 401k was going to be ideal. So once I started looking into it, I saw that it was going to cost $6,000 to $8,000 to set it up. It was going to be a nightmare to manage. So I abandoned it. And then it was, quite a few years later and a few different businesses later that I wanted to set one up. And this time it was more for the benefit of really exclusively for the benefit of the employees. I'm
thinking of your journey, and correct me if I'm wrong, someone who is first starting out in a business might look into just an IRA, a Roth IRA. But then specifically for the business world, kind of setting those two aside, they might look into something called a SEP IRA or a simple IRA. And I wanted to ask you, when do you think someone should start thinking beyond those two in terms of what their business looks like?
So there's really two general reasons that we see an employer offering a 401k. Either they're doing it for predominantly the benefit of the employees, and they may participate themselves, which is certainly recommended, or they're doing it primarily for their own benefit. A lot of owners, oftentimes, they depend on their business for income, and then as they're approaching retirement, maybe they look into it and they realize the prospects of selling the business are a little bit more challenging than they initially thought, or they're not going to have enough. And so they want to start to kind of build that nest egg, in the more traditional sense of somebody who's working for, let's say corporate America. In the first scenario where it's for the employee's benefit, we mentioned SEP and Simple, and someone can go and look those up. But the challenge, I would say, first and foremost in that situation is employees have never heard of that before. CPAs have, and maybe some individuals, but a 401k is ubiquitous. And so if you are trying to attract talent, if you're trying to retain talent, and there's a number of reasons why you would want to do that. I believe it actually costs far less to have a retirement benefit and contribute to those employees than it is to, constantly have to be finding new employees. Probably the biggest reason why you would do it is it's just it's the gold standard when it comes to retirement benefits. The last thing I'm going to mention is there are currently, I believe we're up to 17 states now that have passed legislation that requires in one way or another for employers to offer retirement benefits. So for example, if you're in California as soon as you hire that first employee, you have to offer retirement benefit. Most states, that threshold's like 5 to 10 employees. But that's another point to consider.
I want to go back a little bit to what you mentioned in terms of the benefits for the business owner. So they realize that, like you mentioned, a lot of their income comes from working in the business. And now let's say they're approaching 10 years of business, 5 years of business, and they start looking into the 401k program. Can you speak a little bit about the contribution limits that the employer can put in for themselves as the employee, but also then on their own behalf as the employer?
Yeah, it's upwards of $63,000. It also depends on your age. So once you're over 50, you can do catch-up contributions. And so as the employee, it's around $22,000, $23,000, and then the employer is the remainder of that. And so, in total, yeah, you can get upwards over 60,000 for the employer. Now, if you have employees, depending on the plan design and everything else, you do need to make a contribution to those individuals in some form or another. But again, they kind of generally look at that as total compensation. And so the key takeaway is with just a 401k, you can get up above 63,000. And then, we can also add in cash balance plans, which is sort of, what they call a defined benefit. So there's defined contribution. That's the general term for a 401k, where the employer defines this is what we're going to contribute. And then defined benefit is more like a traditional pension plan, where you're specifying what that benefit is going to be when it's paid out in retirement. And so the cool thing a lot of people don't realize is you can offer both. And so in those situations, and we see this oftentimes with what we call the white coat investors, that's doctors and dentists, and these individuals that, especially as they advance in their career and they're approaching those retirement ages, they're making several $100,000s a year, and this allows them to set aside anywhere from 200 to 300K into a combination of a 401k as well as a cash balance plan. So there's ways we can get really creative with how much that individual can set aside, and a lot of it just comes down to what does that income stream look like? Is it fairly consistent? How long are they going to have this? And that's really where advisors are critical in figuring that out, working with a CPA and kind of figuring that out. But a lot of owners, prior, honestly, to starting 401k, I didn't really understand the power of a cash balance. I didn't really, think pensions existed anymore, especially in small businesses, but they do, and they are very powerful ways to, do tax planning and tax mitigation strategies.
It's interesting because we just went from, the current threshold at the time of this recording might be something in someone's mind of, say, 22,000. And then you ask a couple extra questions and all of a sudden we're in the $60,000 range. Mm-hmm. And then you learn one more thing, just one more thing. And all of a sudden you can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range. And again, to each their own. You got to walk before you can run. These business owners that are learning this for the first time just need to know that there are possibilities and options out there. And sometimes people like to dismiss something because they can find like one little piece of it. It's like, oh, well, so let's speak to that match that people are so familiar with. If you're looking to set up a plan, if you're looking to offer this for the employees, it's going to benefit you as the business owner too. What is a typical percentage based on the type of 401k they're setting up that an employer can expect? And then if there are any kind of cool tricks or rules or things we don't know about, feel free to speak on those as well.
Yeah. So generally, when an employer is considering this, you want to look at about 3 to 4% in terms of a match. So 3 to 4% of an employer's or of an employee's salary.
Well, let me ask you this: in terms of that 3%, is there a threshold for, let's say, a dollar amount? If you have a highly compensated employee, somebody that's been with you for 20 years, 3% of 100,000, that's 3,000. That's an easy number. But what are we really talking here?
I can tell you've done your research. There's that magic term, highly compensated employee. And the cool thing is we can get creative with that. So we can exclude HCEs or highly compensated employees from that match. There's a number of ways we can kind of treat that. 3 to 4% is a good general rule. One of the plan designs that I personally like and I found beneficial in businesses that I've owned is it's called a QACA or QACA. And essentially with that plan, and the reason I like it so much is the employer match component, you can subject that to vesting. And so it's a way of telling those employees, I want to invest in your future if we have a future together. Meaning, if you can stick around for a year, 2 years, however we set up that vesting schedule, then you're eligible to receive that matching contribution. And so that employee that maybe is here for 6 months and decides that they can make a couple bucks more at the company down the street, they're showing little loyalty to you as an employer. I think it's fair to say, well, that's not really kind of why we set up the 401k. And so we can, and depending on the plan design, we can get really creative with those vesting schedules and what they look like. But with the QACA, the way it works is it's kind of it's 100% match on the first, I believe it's the first 2%. And so in order for the employee to get that full 3.5% that's part of the QACA, they've got to contribute 6% themselves. So that's another reason that I really like it is you do have like a non-elective contribution where employees can they'll receive a matching contribution from the employer regardless of whether they're participating in the 401k. But I really like the idea of using the 401k as a way of getting employees to be more, just financially minded, thinking about their own future. And so the QACA requires them to take the first step, and then the employer matches that.
Let's speak to a little bit about the type of questions that a business owner would want to answer in their own head, or if they're onboarding with a company like yours, what are like the top 5 questions they need to answer about their business before they figure out like what's right for them?
Yeah, really, it's pretty simple. And this is one of the things that we focused on extensively in developing 401go is there are some 50 odd variables that go into 401k plan design, of which most of them, the vast majority, are related to administration. And what we've done with our platform was we've automated and simplified a lot of the administration. And so really what's left are, maybe 4 to 5 or 6 different questions that the owner really cares about. And so eligibility, when does the employee become eligible in the 401k? Is it after, is it immediately, like upon hiring? Is it 30 days? Is it several months? Is it a year, 2 years? So again, there's a lot of flexibility in how we design that. So eligibility, the match, whether they want auto enroll. So the match, the amount, the way that it's designed. If it's safe harbor, there's generally 3 or 4 different ways that match is designed with a kind of a traditional 401k non-safe harbor. We can get really creative with that. But most of the employers that we help are generally setting up a safe harbor plan. And so, figuring out what type of match you want, whether you want vesting, and then at the end of the year, if you want to do, additional profit sharing contribution.
I know there's always costs and there's always fees. So maybe we should sort of divide the two. Speak a little bit first about the business owner, the employer. Mm-hmm. What's the cost of something like this? And then, of course, I'm assuming there is a shared fee of some sort for the employee also.
Yes. Yeah. So typically the way that it works is there's 2 general buckets. There are administrative fees. These are oftentimes hard dollar costs. And those are usually paid by the employer. Some of the time the employer can elect to have the employees take a portion of that. But in most situations, they're paid by the employer. And oftentimes what we see is like a monthly fee. So in our situation, it's about $80. And then you have maybe like a per user fee. For us, it's $9. And it's really important to understand what they deem a user. So for us, it means they're actively participating in the 401k, like they're using the platform. For others, they base it off of who's eligible. And so oftentimes you may have, let's say 30 employees, but there's really only 5 that are using it. But of those 30 employees, let's say 25 are eligible, maybe 5 are new hires, or they're part-time. And so in that situation, it can be really expensive because you're paying for those eligible employees. So it's important to understand those distinctions. The second general bucket are fees that come out of plan assets. And what that means is essentially whoever's participating is paying for it. So if an owner is the majority, let's say 80% of the assets in the plan are theirs, then they're paying they're paying 80% of those asset-based fees. So it's a good way to kind of share those costs across those who are, actually using the 401k. But oftentimes the employer, it is in their best interest if they can work with the record keeper and the various service providers that are charging these fees to shift some of the asset-based fees, especially if they're paying 80% of them, over into hard dollar costs. There's tax reasons behind it. It helps their account grow quicker. And so there's a number of reasons why that would be beneficial. And again, it's important to understand how the 401k is going to be utilized. But at the end of the day, a general benchmark is those asset-based fees. It's surprising for a small business, so like 25 employees and less than $500,000 in combined assets. We see that the average is over 2.2%. That's insane. That's really high. In larger, more established plans, we want to see that around 100 basis points, so 1% or lower. On our platform, it's 30 basis points, so 0.3%. So we're a fraction of the cost of what it typically would be, especially if you're a small business. So it's important to look at that. And a lot of times people don't realize, hopefully they realize kind of the compounding interest from an investor perspective, but there's that same impact from a fee perspective. And so when we look at even like, let's say a difference of 1% or 2%, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, for somebody over, let's say, a 40-year career that is, aggressively or even moderately participating in their 401k. So it's really important to get those asset-based fees as low as possible. Those are the two things you should look at. What are the asset-based fees? And then what are the hard dollar costs?
Well, Dan, one of the things that is still on my mind is the choice of investment. I think a lot of people have heard of target date funds, mutual funds, index funds. But when you're signing up for your 401k, all of a sudden there could be maybe just a handful, 5 funds, or there could be 50, and you have this like paralysis by analysis, and you just decide like, I'm going to sign up for this later. So speak to us a little bit about how your company integrates those funds and maybe a little bit about, what they look like.
To help guide those individuals, if they, once they log in and engage with the platform and they go from a target date to something that they choose, we take them through the process of asking them a few questions to help determine what their risk tolerance is, as well as when they intend to retire. Some people may want to retire earlier than the recommended age. Others may want to work a lot longer. And so we let them determine the time horizon, and then we use that risk tolerance to essentially make a recommendation. That recommendation composes about 5 different investments, where you have like a domestic large cap growth fund, for example, and then you have some bond funds as well, where we can use those 5 different investments to kind of create an ideal portfolio for that individual. So there is that pathway. So first, target date fund. Second is what we call that portfolio builder. Third is do it yourself. You go in, we've got about 100 different investments you can choose from. And then we can go what's called open architecture, where we can open up the entire fund universe. This is, again, the value of having an advisor, to where you could do a crypto-based, mutual fund of sorts. And so that gives a lot more flexibility. And again, that's more intended for, let's say, a business owner that, there's really 2 components. A lot of times we talk about risk tolerance, but there's another component of risk, which is risk capacity. And so I own commercial real estate. I have multiple businesses, and, I have maybe more risk capacity because I have all these different investments outside of just my 401k than somebody who is relying exclusively on their 401k and Social Security for retirement.
Wow, what an incredible conversation with Dan Beck. Dan, thank you. The insights we discussed make it clear that offering a 401k plan is not just a benefit, it is a competitive necessity. Check out the link down below in the description to learn more about a powerful resource that may help you choose the best 401k plan tailored specifically to meet your business needs. I'm Rich Smith, and I specialize in empowering business owners like you to take control of your financial future. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment down below about 401k plans, and let me know what topics you'd like to see next covered on this channel.